Welcome to Speedrunner Reviews. In this series I analyse games using the mindset of speedrunning and look at the game from three perspectives. First, the casual experience, which is how most people first play the game. Next, the speedrunner experience, including all the interesting tech and how well the game holds up as a speed game. And finally, the tool-assisted speedrun, showing what the game looks like when pushed to the theoretical limit. If you already know the game and want to jump straight to the speedrun part, I've left timestamps in the description and chapters on the video. And today we're looking at Zillion for the Master System. This is probably considered one of the best games on the Master System, and it was based on the anime of the same name. Full disclosure, I know absolutely nothing about the anime, I just really like the game here. Before we get stuck into it, if you do end up enjoying this video, please consider subscribing to keep up to date. Subscriptions help out the channel a bunch, and I have a new video up every fortnight. So to summarise what this game is, it's essentially like an adventure / exploration game. You go into this secret base here and your task is to take on various rooms, unlock doors, go through secret codes and do a lot of backtracking. Now pretty much the entire premise of the game is unlocking doors using these 4-digit codes. So I picked up a 1, a 6, a 9 and a 0 is the next one there. And if I enter those 4 numbers into the computer, it'll unlock that door at the top right of the room and let me proceed on. So pretty much every room you need to find which of the 4 containers have the 4 numbers in it, and then you need to enter them into the computer. Now as I'm sure you're wondering, are these random, are these not? These are completely random, and I'm fairly sure we're never going to have a way to manipulate what they are. So even if you're speedrunning the game, you still have to look at what those 4 numbers are to open up the doors. Some rooms like this don't have a door that you need to open up and then you can just proceed on, but most rooms in the game will have those 4-digit codes to unlock the doors. Now along with needing the codes in every room, the game itself is pretty non-linear. You do have to figure out where to go, and I imagine if you played it when it came out back in 1987, that would have been a really fun aspect of working your way through the game. The 2 games I see this compared most to, well, the first one's Impossible Mission, and you can sort of see why. There's elevators and computers and stuff, and it looks very similar. And the other one that I see it compared to a lot is Metroid. And you can sort of see why this happens, because Zillion has a lot of backtracking and non-linear movement throughout the game, but I think the real reason it gets compared to Metroid a lot is because both have an escape sequence at the end of the game. It's fair to say Zillion was pretty influenced. I do think though that comparing Zillion to those 2 games is a bit unfair because it's got its own unique spin on things, and there's only a few similarities here and there between Zillion and those 2 games that I mentioned. So yeah, pretty much the gameplay loop of this is just going into each room, finding the 4-letter code and opening the door. You're going to have to do this a lot of the time throughout the game, and the first bit's pretty straightforward, but then the next bit gets pretty messy. I can never not think of The Simpsons when I see these codes though. They're not exactly the same symbols, but it's basically the same pattern. And the way that it works is that it's pretty much just the same number reversed. So you see that there, that's a 5, it's 2 5s back to front. It's worth mentioning that there are other things you can do with the computer terminal beyond just opening the door with a 4-digit code. For example, well, this is literally all the extra stuff that you can do. So you can disable laser barriers and enemies and stuff. Pretty much none of it's useful in a speedrun apart from just warping around and stuff, but it's good to know that you can do that if you want to avoid damage and things like that. In fact, you might be wondering about the 0000 code, which will cause you to get a game over. And it's actually kind of cool because you'd never think you'd enter that code, but if you do, you sometimes get Easter eggs. So normally if you enter this code in a room, basically, yeah, as I said, you get game over. But weirdly enough, if you enter it in this room, you get a lovely message. You have a keen intellectual appetite. And if you enter it in this room, it gives you a handy hint. Just in case you're wondering, that gives you a level up. Now, although these little Easter eggs are just sort of throwaway little Easter eggs, I really like that they put them in the game because it shows that they had a bit of care for the game and they didn't just throw it together. Speaking of, there's just secrets hidden all over the place. For example, in the first little bit of the game here, you'll get to the left side of the elevator shaft, and if you just randomly think to shoot the wall, well, you'll come into a secret area. This is actually really useful towards the start of the game because it gets you an ID card and a level up early. Speaking of, we need to talk about ID cards and level ups. So that's a level up there. It's actually Oppa Oppa from Fantasy Zone, which is an awesome Sega reference, and they have an ID card as well. So the level up just gives you more health, makes you take less damage, and allows you to move faster, which means that it's good to level up in a speedrun. And the ID card lets you activate the computers. So if you don't have an ID card, well, you can't get into the computer like this and actually enter the code. Conveniently, entering the code to open the doors in the levels doesn't use up an ID card, but something like that 2222 code, which disables the barriers, does use up ID cards. So there's a little bit of management involved there, but you can pretty much get through the entire game on basically one ID card if you don't want to use any warps or anything like that. Aside from this level up, you have the gun power up, and basically start off on power level 1 and then it goes up to level 2, and level 3 is the maximum level, and that can be a cause of backtracking throughout the game. By the way, that little hint we saw before, that hint allows you to open up that level up right there, which allows you to level up a little bit earlier than you otherwise could. It's actually really funny. This room does have a code in it, but you can't find out what the code is in the game, and if you enter the code, you get that level up without actually shooting the wall over there. Now, before I said the game was pretty big and confusing, now I want to give you a scope for just how big and confusing this can be. So this is the whole game map. We got the first area here I've sort of drawn on top of there. You can see that level up room we were just in before. And yeah, it gets pretty big. And this section here, you can see it looks kind of normal, but if you look at how many hectic arrows I've got all over the place, it is very non-linear to get through. So it can be pretty confusing to work your way through the game. And you got backtracking, for example, this section here, where you have to go all the way down here to get a gun power upgrade, just down in that section there, and then all the way back up and hit this floppy disk there. You need the gun power 3 to get that floppy disk, which is why you need to come back. Speaking of, the goal of the game is to get 5 floppy disks, so I put them in stars here, and you also want that red floppy disk right at the end, and then you basically just go to this section to beat the game. So it can be very confusing the first time you play through it, but I really enjoyed playing through it the first time, and I didn't Google that much playing through it the first time, so it's one of those nice ones that you can line up with a grid book and sort of figure out what you're doing, and just pretend you don't have an internet connection for a while. I did the same thing with Phantasy Star when I was first really getting into these kind of Sega games, and I definitely would recommend the experience. Now, along with that requirement for any percenting the game, you can also get these 2 extra characters to 100% the game. So you start off with JJ and you can get Apple and Champ. I'm assuming these are very important in terms of the anime, but again, I have no idea. So you can play as these characters, and you'll notice that they've got slightly different stats, but unfortunately the level ups and gun upgrades are independent between characters. So if you've leveled up JJ to level 8, which is the max, Apple will still be on level 1, so you've still got to find another 7 level ups to get her to that top level, and also her gun won't be able to break through any of those high gun powered things that you need to break through. So generally, if I'm 100%ing this game, I will just play as JJ all the way through, unless I happen to die as one of the characters, and then I'm forced to swap out to a different one. But if you do make it through the game and get all the characters, you'll actually get a better ending to end with, so it's a bit of a nice way to change it up a little bit, and it honestly doesn't take that long to get all the characters compared to any percent. We're talking maybe like a 2-minute difference or something like that. Speaking of which, I'm going to talk a bit about the ending here, so if you don't want spoilers, probably best to skip ahead to the speedrun section here. Pretty much what I want to talk about is it's kind of funny. They give all the characters like blood types and stuff in the credits for some reason. So yeah, just in case you were a big fan of the anime and you just really needed to know Champ's blood type, yeah, it's on here. Blood type B. I also really like here that they gave Oppa Oppa measurements as well. Again, this is that Fantasy Zone character, and I just find it so cool that it cameos so heavily in this game. It's heavier than I thought it would be though. This footage is from the English version of the game, which kind of reduces the screen down a bit, but the Japanese version has a whole bunch of extra measurements about the characters, and I don't know why they were in or out of the English version. It's a bit strange. So that's going to be it for this casual section pretty much. Look, I won't lie, the game can get kind of draining with the 4-letter codes just happening over and over, but it is one of the better Master System games, and it's a really enjoyable adventure exploration feeling that you get from playing it, just once you get past the tedium of entering codes over and over again. Definitely worth your time, but just be sure to take it with a grain of salt. Just worth keeping in mind, the game is actually pretty difficult as well. It's very easy to die, which is why you might want those extra 2 characters unlocked. Alright, so now we'll talk about the speedrun of this game. You can see there's a whole bunch of different categories, and actually there was a really old run on Speed Demo's archive, and that was pretty much the only run for the longest time. But since then we've had some really good runs here, mostly a year ago or whatever like that, and glitchless tends to be the more popular category. There are no runs of any percent, like straight any percent with glitches, except that I did do one just the other night and managed to get record on any percent good ending. So I got a 28:37 for this category, and compared to the glitchless 31:40, we're talking about 3 minutes faster, so I was pretty happy with that run. Glitchless bad ending is quite well optimized, and we'll look at that first. Alright, just before we talk about the run itself, I just want to talk about the movement here. So pretty straightforward, running will make you run. You can sort of duck under ledges like this, and you can raise yourself back up, and you can jump. Now this is one of those games where jumping and shooting is swapped, so it's jumping on the leftmost button and shooting on the rightmost button. It's a bit frustrating at first, but you do get used to it. One thing that I'll mention is that if you do a big jump onto a platform, you can see there that I ran on successfully. You'll notice just keep running there. But if you do a big jump onto a platform and sort of land with a higher speed down onto the platform, you actually get stuck. I can show that here as well. Get stuck there, and you have this like little delay before you start running. So if you're going to jump onto like a lower platform, you might want to do like a shorter jump so that you're not hitting it with as much downward speed, because if that downward speed gets too high that you're hitting it with, you're going to have a delay before you can actually start moving. Also, pretty standard video game stuff, you tend to shoot faster while you're in the air. So if you shoot on the ground, you're going to come to a stop, just like that. But if you shoot while you're jumping, you're not actually going to come to a stop. So try and shoot while you're jumping if you can. And generally, if you see a platform like this, it's best to go underneath it rather than over it, because it's a quicker animation turn down times than it is to jump and then the slowdown from landing again. It's worth mentioning that even on flat ground, if you jump and land, you're going to get a delay when you land because you're hitting it with too high a downward speed when you hit the ground. Now you can level up in these games by collecting the like Opa things, and this is basically what the movement speed looks like upon leveling up. So you can see the first 4 levels don't really make any difference, but once you get into higher levels your movement speed starts increasing pretty quickly, and also your jump height increases, although I don't have the exact numbers there, I just know it gets bigger. If you're wanting to level up really quickly, there are 2 really good places to do it. So you got this secret wall basically at the start of the game, and it's a brilliant room to visit because you pretty much get this level up and ID card. And right after you get the first gun upgrade, there's another really convenient level up to get, as well as the one that's intentional in this room. You literally just duck and shoot this wall for a little while, and then that'll open up, and you get this level up here. As I mentioned before, if you know what the 4-digit code is in this room, you can enter it to open those doors, which is totally not intended. And I guess the way you're supposed to know to duck down and shoot this wall is by doing that little Easter egg code we looked at in the casual section. Alright, now we're going to look at Chest Jerk's any percent glitchless run in 22:29. First thing you'll notice is that they're shooting the guards from a distance and then immediately ducking. Now, if you can shoot the guards and be confident they're not going to shoot you back, it's actually optimal to just run straight through them, but ducking is definitely the safest strategy because you can see now they're not getting bonked back by the bullets. The guards are somewhat random in when and where they come, so you've got to kind of shoot as soon as you see them, because if you're a bit too late, then you might miss this little timing here. Jumping over the mines there is a little bit faster, but damage boosting through them is still almost the same speed. And then Chest Jerk is going to do that little strategy I talked about with the level ups here. So they get 1 level up in the secret room, and then a little bit further on they have to start actually getting the codes from these terminals. So there's no manipulating these codes, you have to actually check in on what they actually are. These codes are different every time you play it, and it depends on your movement coming into the room and everything leading up to them to an extremely precise level. So it depends on the exact frame you enter the room and your button presses leading up to that. There's going to be pretty much no way to consistently manipulate what those codes are. Chest Jerk does have to watch their health value here to make sure they don't die on this laser. You can see they're on 60 and then bumped up to 740 with the level up. They're now going to do yet another level up here to put them on 3 level ups total so far. then they actually use a warp code back. So the terminals have the quadruple 6 warp code, which warps you always back to this spot on the map here, and the quadruple 7s, which warp you back to the elevator that you were last on. So with that warp code, Chest Jerk is progressing through the rest of the game, but crucially they now have the second gun upgrade, which you need to progress past this point. Just talking purely in terms of the map, they've sort of done this little red arrow section up the top here, came down the lift, and they're going to progress left through here. You'll see there is another level up you could grab there, but you need the third gun upgrade to get it, so they're now going to progress down through this section. Now this section of the run is going to look a little bit weird. Chest Jerk has got the 4-letter code, so they're entering that here. It opens up both the door and that pink elevator in the middle of the room. So they're going to head down a room and just grab a level up here. Now that level up seems really far out of the way, but the crucial thing is that's increased both their movement speed and jump height. So with that increase, they're going to make their way around to this room here and sort of duck down into the next section of the map. Alright, so there's a level up in this room, and the crucial thing is to get that level up, you do need the increased jump height. So the level up's sort of on the top right section of the map here, so you can see it there, and the increased jump height comes in handy to make your way up to there. And you actually can't make this jump if you're at a lower level, so you need to jump off that bit there. This was a room where they got the previous level up, so they're just going to make their way back through and enter the code here. Now it's at this point that I really want to stop and point out how much knowledge and memory has to go into this. So there's the obvious stuff, you just need to know where to go on the map, and it's an extremely complicated map. But then within every room you need to know which of these capsules are actually going to give you the password. So it's these 4 out of the total of 6 capsules, and then you have to remember that, otherwise you're wasting time checking them unnecessarily. The other thing that I'll mention is this run really hurts your brain when you do it, because you have to remember all these 4-digit codes, and not only that, but when you enter them in the computer you want to put them in the increasing order. You'll see here when Chest Jerk enters them on this computer, they're going to go left to right on the computer entry here. So yeah, 6, 7, 8, 9. Because if you went 9, 8, 7, 6, you would end very far away from the enter button, and that would actually lose you time. So not only do you have to remember what all 4 of the numbers are, you also have to sort of in your head put them in the correct order. Now, when I was running this game, I actually made myself my own set of cards that look like this, and then I would like push up the 4 that I found in the room to make the correct code, and then I could easily read them off left to right. This worked brilliantly. The only issue is there's not enough downtime in a room to push them up and then push them back down again. If you look at this computer code entry here, for example, you can see that there's pretty much 0 controller downtime. So while I really liked my card strategy, it was actually too slow and I had to start remembering them, just like Chest Jerk must be doing here. I actually had another system using like guitar picks to point at the right ones, but that also didn't work very well. There's a couple of cool situations like this one here. See how far out of the way Chest Jerk goes to get that 4 symbol. In theory, you've got, a 1 in 7 chance of guessing the correct symbol if there's one symbol you don't know. So in theory, they might have been able to guess that that was a 4 and then save themselves a bunch of time. But in practice, it's not really worth doing it, and that point in the run is the bit where it would be the most worth it. You'd only save a couple seconds. You might also notice Chest Jerk ducking down for a level up there, and that level up doesn't actually do anything. You're already at maximum speed and maximum jump height here. But what it actually does do is restore your health to maximum. So Chest Jerk is using this as a strategy to stop them from dying throughout the run, because it's very easy to take damage throughout the run, and if you play this casually or try and do the speedrun route normally, you will probably die over and over and over. So that's the other tricky part of running this game. It's the memory, it's the knowledge, it's the quick inputs, but it's also the avoiding damage and trying not to die. You can't actually see it on screen, but there's these zones where enemies start spawning if you hit those zones, and yeah, you don't want to hit those because the enemies will usually kill you. You can actually get this goggle upgrade which lets you see those zones, but it's not really worth it in a run like this. There is a little bit extra that Chest Jerk could be doing up those lifts by just jumping up there to save a bit of time, but it's pretty inconsistent, so it's not really worth doing it in RTA. Chest Jerk gets the 3rd and strongest gun upgrade from this room, and then does a cheeky warp back to the elevator here. So with that warp, they're going to go back and get the data floppy disk with this gun upgrade. You just got to head up the elevator and to the right, and you can see this special capsule over here could not be broken beforehand, and now it can. One other really good part about this gun upgrade is being able to break the landmines with it, so there'll be no more awkward jumping over them. You can usually just duck down and shoot to get through them. Now there's this really long drop down the lift, and if you just ride the lift down it takes ages, but Chest Jerk does this thing where they lift the lift up and then fall underneath it. Now I'm actually not too thrilled that this is in the glitchless route, because I would consider it a glitch personally, but obviously it's not under the rules, so it was used in this run. That fall saves about 3 seconds if done optimally over just riding the lift down normally. There are other lifts that you could fall down in theory, but that's the only one that saves time. Alright, Chest Jerk is now getting into the light blue section, and this is extremely non-linear. For that reason, I'm not going to talk too much in detail about the route, although I did show the map earlier in the video if you're curious about how messed up it is. We're going to go straight towards the end of the run though. Alright, so after getting all 5 of the data discs and opening up a whole bunch of doors to let you get through all these sections here, Chest Jerk is going to ride the elevator up to the final boss. You take a little detour out here to get the red disc, and fun fact, if you could jump from the ground up to this bit here, you would save so much time, but that jump as far as I can tell is impossible. But basically the way you round off the game is you want to get into this. If you have the 5 data discs and the red floppy disk, what you can do is you can go into this computer, and then you can enter the base explosion command. It's quadruple 8 to enter that. Once you enter that, you run out, and basically the game turns into Metroid and you have a little escape sequence. You can see it's 300 seconds at the top, but the tense thing is, the final boss in the game you have to do under the escape timer. So this is only vulnerable while its mouth is open, and you sort of have to dodge its shots as well. But if you can get up right close to it and fire a whole bunch of shots really quickly, you'll get past it. You can actually go back and enter another code to reset the timer after the boss, but it's not really worth it at this point. From this moment, Chest Jerk pretty much just leaves the base here, and that's going to be the end of the run. So you can see here, this is basically leaving the base now, and you see they have so much time left on the timer, so there's not really any threat in a speedrun of running out of time there. Now, just while I'm talking about the explosion countdown, some really interesting stuff happens towards the end of the countdown. So if you let it end while you're on the land, nothing bad happens. If you let it end while you're inside the base, you do get a game over, so that's what happens. But I found this really weird glitch years ago where if you end right on the screen transition back down into the base, basically it'll try to close off the base, but it won't succeed. And then you can actually just like fall back into the base after the explosion time is done. But the really weird thing is there's like no elevators anywhere. I haven't found anything useful for this glitch, and it wouldn't be useful because basically as soon as you get up onto the surface the run's pretty much over. But it's worth mentioning there are some cool effects that can happen with it. Alright, now we'll talk a little bit more about some of the other categories. So the first thing I really want to mention is that Chest Jerk's 2229 is quite optimal. There is glitchless good ending, and Kate Sith has been around for years doing runs of this game. I would say this one is not quite as optimized as the any % one is. Now, I won't show much about that because it's pretty much just grabbing extra characters, but I will show something about my any % good ending run with glitches. So first thing I'll mention here is actually the interesting timer starting point. It starts on pressing no on this screen here. I imagine that may have been to reduce the difference between the languages in timing, because Japanese is slightly faster to get through that screen there. But as I'm sure you're wondering, what glitches are used in this run? And there's pretty much just one. It's an invincibility glitch. So you'll see me fall down on the elevator here and go back up. And you'll see me die on the electric beam right as I'm transitioning through a screen, and that timing is tricky. Now I pretty much had 0 health, but now I'm not going to take damage from anything at all in the game. So for the entire rest of the run, you pretty much just walk through every single damage source, not worrying about anything at all. And it makes the run quite a bit quicker. I don't think it makes it a lot quicker because you still have to set up the invincibility glitch, but there's very low risk because you can't really die anymore. And then you really worry about your movement rather than just like dodging bullets and stuff. It's a matter of personal preference, but if you are going to pick up speedrunning this game, I would recommend the glitched categories, mainly because that's sort of the norm for most speedrun games. Like, glitch is a fair game and this is an invincibility glitch, and also because it makes it a lot more approachable to pick up as a run. I don't think I'd be very successful running glitchless because I'm pretty bad at dodging all the enemy projectiles and stuff. Now the only other real difference here is I've got the good ending, which means I do rescue the 2 other characters here. Interestingly, pausing doesn't work when you got the invincibility glitch running, so you can't really pause to swap out characters except for when you initially get the character. The only other glitches worth mentioning are this elevator skip, which I sort of talked about. It was in the glitchless category anyway. And just yesterday when I was doing this run, I found a wall clip. Now I was unsuccessful in getting it in this run here, so you won't see it on the video, but basically on this elevator you just have to go really far to the right when you ride it up, and then you can clip through that wall there. If you make it through, it just skips a little bit of movement around the room, and I definitely would consider that a glitch. So I got a 28:37, which is why I was pretty happy to submit this time, so it's about 3 minutes faster than the glitchless record for good ending or 100%. I did actually try and do a glitch run of any percent, but I couldn't beat the glitchless world record. It's that optimized. I was getting about 24 and the record's in the 22s. So yeah, that's why I don't have an any percent run of this up, despite having actually done them. So overall, if you're looking for a fun speed game to try out, I probably would recommend giving this one a go, especially if you're like kind of mathy and like memory and stuff. But every time you do like 6 or 7 runs, your brain is going to be sore, because remembering these 4-digit codes and putting them in order in your head like 30-40 times in a run, it sounds easy, but it's not. So now we'll move on to talking about the Taz. Now you might remember that Kate Sith character who has the good ending 100% record on speedrun.com. Turns out they made a Taz of this game back in 2012. Now that is a really long time ago for a Taz, and since then there hasn't been another 100% Taz of this game. But it is kind of in need of one, because this Diga emulator this was made on, it's pretty old and it's not really great to have Taz's still on Diga. We want them on BizHawk these days. Now, as much as this Taz was impressive for the time, I'm going to talk about the Taz that I just completed a couple of days ago, and the Taz that I just completed was any percent glitched. Alright, so let's launch into it. This any percent Taz is in 1512.024. First thing you will notice is in Japanese, it saves literally one text box on that first screen there. Now, although you should never directly compare them, this Taz is about 7 minutes faster than RTA. Why is that? Well, it's because the Taz just knows what the codes are without having to find them in those capsules. Now, to show you what I really mean about this, I'm going to pull up all my little RAM watches on screen, but in particular I want you to keep an eye on codes, which I put in the bottom right. You can see in this current room the code is 8970, and as soon as we change room, that code changes to something else. It will depend on your precise movements coming into the room, but here 7869, so I'm going to enter 6789. Now, I intentionally manipulated the codes to be numbers that are sort of on the right of the computer entry screen, and the reason for this is every time that you have a number to the left, I think it's like 6 or 7 frames that you lose. So if I had to enter 1 as part of my code, I would lose a whole bunch of time. So you can see here I've actually just got 7890, which is the absolute best code you can possibly get. Now the chances of that happening are incredibly low. So realistically, I settled for a minimum number of 6 in my code, which means that every room, and if I speed it up here, you'll see any room where I'm entering a code, it's going to have a minimum code number of 6 that I have to enter here, and I've done RNG manipulation to make that happen. In the previous 100% Taz on Taz videos from 2012 that we saw before, they set a minimum code number to 5, so they had a bit more wiggle room, but they could potentially have lost more time. Setting a minimum code number to 6 is not strictly optimal 100%, but more often than not, you have to sacrifice time to manipulate these code numbers. So if I was going to have the minimum number of 7 and have it be the fastest code to enter, I would be losing more time to doing the RNG manipulation than I would just setting a minimum number of 6. You can usually fluff around just doing different button presses to get the minimum code number you want to be 6, but sometimes you have to delay coming into the room by a frame or 2. And you can see even with these manips, sometimes I even get a min code of 7, which is really good when that happens. If you're wondering how I do the manipulation itself, one key part of it is just when you're exiting this screen. When the card's coming out, your button presses there will manipulate RNG, so you can just alternate the 1 and 2 button to manipulate RNG to something else. Any other time, your button presses won't manipulate RNG unless it's going to actually affect the character's movement. So for example, sometimes you'll see me just randomly shoot in the air, and the reason that I do that sometimes is to manipulate a code like this. But apart from that, the route's going to look very similar to what we saw before with the RTA route, just with really optimized movement. You can see here shooting stuff in advance, ducking around, doing short jumps so that I don't get slowed down on ledges, and just entering the codes as optimally as possible here. You can see that when I get to the top of an elevator, I'll do a jump off basically as early as I possibly can to make it up to the next room. And you can see that any ducks or coming ups from platforms are done with optimal spacing. So realistically, most of the time save is coming from A, having the codes be the rightmost numbers, saving time, and B, not actually having to break the capsules to see what the codes are. But it's worth mentioning that movement does play a big role in this as well. So the movement that the Taz can do is very precise, and it just avoids slowdown pretty much absolutely everywhere. There's some particular nuances with movement. In particular, the jumping is pretty funky. So the first frame that you're holding when you're jumping will set your trajectory quite a bit. So if you're holding right, you'll move to the right quite fast. But then subsequent frames will cause you to turn around, just not at a particularly fast rate. So jumping needs to be optimized very carefully in a Taz. And as I mentioned before, whenever you're jumping up to a ledge, you don't want to be falling back down onto that ledge with too high of a Y velocity, because that will cause you to stop when you land back on the ledge. It's worth mentioning that I am totally desperate for a clip in one of these rooms at least. You'll notice this room that I'm about to go into here. This is basically the end of the game, but you can see I need to go to this PC to open the door up the top. And then once that door's open, I need to circle back around the entire map to get back to this room. If we could just get a clip through one of those walls, seriously, this run would come down probably by several minutes. The other thing worth mentioning is this room here. You'll notice a capsule up the top right. If I could make the jump up to that capsule, I would be able to go pretty much straight to the end of the game. So again, making that jump up there would save several minutes on the run. But I tried and tried, I just can't make it happen, at least not yet. Speaking of clips, there's one here. I ride the elevator up into the wall and just like walk straight through it and go to the computer. It's a little bit faster than jumping over that wall. Now, we can't get that clip in RTA. It's a little bit tricky, but it's doable. Although it wouldn't save time because you need to go up here to get the code letter from that little capsule up there. Literally 2 rooms later, there's another clip up here. That just saves literally just a handful of frames just by jumping on the right of that wall rather than the left. And the third elevator clip is that one I talked about before, just squeezing through that wall to save a little bit of time. Now, while we're on the escape, this is what the start of it looks like. And just check out how fast this final boss is. It's HPs on the left if you're interested. Yeah, it's a quick boss. So by auto-firing into its mouth when it's open, it saves a lot of time. There's also another real weird thing about this boss, and I'll play it back. So pretty much with this boss, you can do a double hit. So normally your bullets do 3 damage to this boss. But if you do the right spacing, you'll notice the first couple of hits actually do 6 damage. And that's just a weird spacing thing. That spacing trick also works on the walls that you have to shoot at in the game. From here, the escape pretty much plays out as normal, and you'll see what I mean about not trying to get that slowdown upon landing, or at least not as much as possible. So we make our way through this little room here, you do the optimal ducks underneath, and you basically just jump up. But you'll notice on all these jumps, I don't jump too high, because if I jump any higher, I'll get that slowdown on the ground, which I really don't want. So we space it under there, and just these little movement optimizations save so much time throughout the escape, just here and there. And just to show how far we've come in 12 years, the escape ended on a 144 in the published 100% Taz. This escape will end on a 152. So that saves 8 in-game seconds, but it's worth mentioning that a big part of that is having the invincibility glitch for the final boss. I think that's about 4 out of the 8 seconds that bit saves. So realistically, it's only a 4 seconds on movement, but that's just the power of Taz Studio and modern Lua scripting that wasn't available back on Diga. So it's really nice to see the big community around this game, especially for a Master System game. It's got quite a bit of attention, and it's nice to see the work that everyone's put into it. It's a really cool difference between Taz and RTA in my opinion, with all this code stuff, and definitely worth checking out as a speed game if you're interested. That's going to be all for this video, and thanks so much for watching.